Now, my next guest thinks that the opinion missed a key point, and that is that Dr. King was a big supporter of the State of Israel. Daniel Pomerantz is the Executive Director of Honest Reporting. Daniel, nice to have you in studio with us. So Michelle Alexandra trying to use Martin Luther King as a springboard to attack Israel, but she gets us wrong on many levels, according to you.
Of course, I just flew in from Israel just now, and our national pastime is criticizing our country. But we have to base it on something that's actually real. Ms. Alexander's criticisms were based simply on falsehoods, and the New York Times has a responsibility to fact check. For example, her conspiracy theory that Israel's lobby controls the United States Congress was well documented, and she had a link there. It was a link to the homepage of the Washington Post. I'm not sure how the Washington Post feels about that.
So much for well documented then, yeah.
She says that Israel has Jewish-only roads. It doesn't. That Israel has apartheid. It doesn't. She says that it is impossible in this country to speak out about Israel, even though she was writing in the New York Times. But most of all, and this is what really got me, she made it clear that she was not being anti-Semitic. She was merely criticizing Zionism. And on Martin Luther King Day, or the week of Martin Luther King Day, I think it's worth pointing out one of his famous quotes. When people criticize Zionists, they mean Jews. You're talking anti-Semitism. He was referring exactly to people like Ms. Alexander. She's not only missed the understanding of what Israel is, she's missed the understanding of Dr. King's message and what civil rights is really all about.
And as we said, a big supporter of Israel was Martin Luther King. There is this notion, though, that being anti-Israel is not being anti-Semitic. And it's not just a sentiment that we're seeing from the likes of Michelle Alexander. Somehow that has become permissible in social circles to be critical of Israel, to criticize Israel and Israelis, and that not being translated as being anti-Semitic.
Well, there's an internationally accepted definition of anti-Semitism. It's been adopted by most of the Western world, and it states that criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism, but holding Israel to an unfair double standard is. And one way of holding Israel to a double standard is to make statements about Israel that are simply untrue. Not only did Ms. Alexander do that, but the New York Times didn't catch that.
Right.
That, holding Israel to a standard that one doesn't apply to anyone else, is in fact anti-Semitism.
Yeah. Using terms like apartheid, for example, when that is just factually inaccurate.
Exactly.
But there are many that may agree with some of her points, regardless of how factually sound they are or not, but they still point out that nowhere was Palestinian terrorism or any kind of actions by the Palestinians mentioned.
Well, one of the worst things, Dr. King made it clear that civil rights is about self-determination, peace, security, freedom for all people. That's why he was a Zionist supporting the Jewish right to achieve these things. But who's standing up for the Palestinians who live under Hamas, a terror group on the same international lists as ISIS, who live under the Palestinian Authority government, who have a $403 million a year fund to pay for terrorism and takes that money away from Palestinians in need? People like Ms. Alexander are not standing up for those Palestinians, whereas Israel moves 800 truckloads per day of aid into Gaza. It's important to stand up for all people in need, and that includes Palestinians in a fair way. Do we have time for me to share a quote from Dr. King?
Go ahead, share a quote.
All right,
from Dr.
because
King.
I don't want to focus too much on Ms. Alexander, because this is a day to speak about Dr. King and his message. He said, "Peace for Israel means security, and we must stand with all our might to protect its right to exist, its territorial integrity. I see Israel as one of the great outposts of democracy in the world, as a marvelous example of what can be done, how a desert can be transformed into an oasis of brotherhood and democracy." That's what Dr. King said. That's the message the New York Times should be sharing this week.
And resonating with that democracy in the Middle East message is another one of your articles, which criticizes the Columbia Journalism Review for claiming that Israel suppresses Arab journalism when Israel is the most free journalistic environment.
Not only is it, in fact, that was an excellent piece written by one of our editors, Pesach Benson, who did a very deep review. This article in the Columbia Review spoke to a few journalists who were freelancers and not very well known. but there are a great number of excellent Arab journalists. We work with them frequently at Honest Reporting, and actually a great number of them work for i24.
We know that, yeah. We have a whole Arabic division in i24
You certainly
that broadcasts just in Arabic.
Yes, Ayman Sislik used to have Lucy Irish, who's now with Israel's Channel 2, which is a major journalistic television station in Israel. And when I'm in...
Not to toot our own horn, but i24 has been very instrumental in giving a big platform to Arabic journalists.
And in fact, when I'm in Israel, I'm often on i24 in Israel, and I frequently sit at the Arab desk to speak to the journalists there and get insights so that I can do my job better.
Daniel, speaking of doing your job, Honest Reporting very quickly taking legal action against Airbnb for blocking Jewish apartment listings in Judea and Samaria, the disputed territories. Very quickly, in about 30 seconds, where do things stand there?
Well, where things stand is, this boycott was against only Jewish homes in the area, not against Muslim or Christian homes. It's brought only against Israel. People don't realize that a boycott of a foreign nation is actually illegal under U.S. law. We're not talking about domestic boycotts like in the civil rights movement. A boycott against a foreign nation is actually a tool of statecraft. We brought an action with the U.S. Office of Anti-Boycott Compliance, and so far, Airbnb has said we are reconsidering all of the complexities of this situation and not implementing our policy now. It may be that they will never implement it. We hope that they'll see the right and do the right thing.
All right. Well, we'll get an update from you. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank you, Michelle.